thank you all once again for joining. And I think I would love for us to do is for you all to just start with a super brief, like 3-minute overview of your career. So sort of like, what was your PhD in? Did you do a postdoc? What was your first position sort of after your training? How did you break into that? And then maybe like, where are you now? And just very generally in like a sentence or two, what does your day to day look like? And then once we do that for all three of you, we will go into more questions from the audience, but just to make sure that everyone sort of has a general idea of who you are and sort of like what career fields you are representing today. So just because you're at the top on my screen, Sofina, I'm gonna have you go first.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming off of camera. My name is Sofina Taitano. I'm a PhD in immunology. So I did my PhD at the University of Michigan, and then I came to Anschutz for my postdoc. I did that mostly because I wasn't really sure if academia was going to be right for me, so I wanted to give it one more shot in a different lab with a different PI. And really, what the postdoc gave me was the opportunity to do career exploration like you're doing now. I didn't do much when I was a graduate student, so it was a really great opportunity for me and with Bruce and all the team as well. So after about a year, I realized, well, a little before a year, I realized I didn't want to be in the lab anymore. And so I started looking for industry positions, but I wanted it to use my PhD and not just be some random industry position. So I was looking for things that would play off of my immunology background. And I applied to things through LinkedIn. And then the one that I ended up actually getting was just one of those emails that you get from your society. So mine was the American Association of Immunologists, so AAI. They had a email blast of different jobs, mostly postdocs, but then there was this one at the end, um, and it was selling dextromers. So it was a commercial role, but also it needed to have a lot of scientific background to have conversations with customers. So that was my first role out of my postdoc. It was a good experience. Small company. I was number 30, and I've quickly realized selling doesn't really match with my personality, but it gave me a lot of good experience to move into my next role, which was a field application scientist. So you probably work with some of those from different biotech companies. Like I know Millipore has one. I worked with her, but I was specifically at 10x Genomics. And that was a much more scientific role. So I was training people on how to use the technology and also kind of doing some experimental design. And then from there, my husband wanted to move back to Kansas City, because that's where he's from. His parents are getting older. So I was like, okay, we can't just move for any job. We have to move for our dream job. And that had always been medical science liaisons. And lo and behold, he got his MSL position much quicker than I thought. So my entire like backpacking year went out the window. But then that meant like, okay, now I'm moving. So this is a good opportunity for me to move into that role as well. So I got my first MSL position after I moved. Got laid off twice so far, and now I'm in my third MSL position. But yeah, we can chat more about that later on.
Great, amazing. I don't. So you and your husband are both MSLs.
Yeah,
Oh, that's fun.
almost like our entire resume is pretty much the same.
I like that. It's like the two body problem, but you're like intentionally making it work.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, Kelly, how about you next?
Sure. Thanks everyone for joining, especially off schedule. I think Bruce maybe alluded to some previous iCERch people, and that was me. I think I was an iCERch fail because I got my job during the iCERch program, so I never finished it. So fail or a giant success story. I'll take the latter. So I'm closer, just kind of from my postdoc, I was in the iCERch program 2 years ago. So I'm currently a clinical research manager at a nutrition technology company. And I've been in this role for 2 years, and this was the role straight out of my postdoc. Kind of before that, I also was a little afraid to leave academia, right? It's what you feel like you're training for. I wanted to make sure it was really not what I wanted to continue to pursue. And so I stayed in training for a lot. I did my master's in nutrition and I did clinical research as part of that project focused on diabetes. And then my PhD was in physiology and it was much more molecular, looking at mechanisms of fatty liver disease. And I did a lot of sex difference-based work. And then in my postdoc, I kind of combined the two. I had two advisors, one clinical arm and one preclinical arm. And I really tried to utilize my postdoc as kind of that decision-making point. So I continued to apply to a lot of grants. I actually got my F-32 and was working on that when I realized, okay, I think this is working out for me, but do I want it to work out for me? And I felt like that was a really hard decision point of, okay, I can do this, but do I want to do this? And is there something else that I would enjoy more that I can use kind of similar skills? And so that's what I spent a lot of my postdoc doing, is really trying to spend my time purposefully figuring out which part of science I enjoyed and which part I didn't. And so I used that a lot to get into this position now. And I'm in a very small company. There are 10 of us. And so in kind of this small company, you wear a lot of different hats, which I actually love. And so my title is clinical research manager, but I do a lot of grant writing still. I do a lot of clinical research through kind of academic external partners. And then because we're a technology company, part of my job is also product development and serving as I'm also a dietitian. So I use kind of that clinical hat as part of my role in helping inform the product for scientists that use it. So there's kind of a liaison aspect to that too. So happy to answer any questions about kind of training, decision points, what I do now later on.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And I don't know if you saw in the chat, Bruce said definitely a success story. And I would agree. I think if you
Thank you.
have to leave iCERch because you get a job, that we will count that as a success. Okay. So then, Golly, do you want to finish us off?
Sure, happy to. I've got a couple of slides that I've used in the past, which may be helpful to show the
Yeah, that'd be
journey.
great.
So my journey started high school at NIH. I worked closely with Wayne Rasband on the ImageJ program, which got me really interested in the science efforts. My claim to fame, I wrote the color picker tool, which I think a lot of you may use, and a number of different plugins intersecting with the scientific community globally. I still get requests from, I think last one was Italy, asking for some adjustments to some plugins I'd written 12 years ago. Unfortunately, I don't work on those projects anymore. But I went in to do my bachelor's of material science and engineering at Cornell University, and then over the summer did a variety of different research experiences to continue building out the skill set beyond just material science. Doctoral degree in biomedical engineering at Northwestern University, where I studied protein denaturation. And my project ranged from doing computational molecular dynamic simulations in the morning all the way to animal experiments and implanting the same things I was simulating in the computer into small rats. Along the way, I got really interested in entrepreneurship and projects to translate technologies outside academia. So I participated in a variety of different innovation focused programs at Northwestern, including a management program at their business school, leading to the founding of a startup company called Syntact Medical Systems. Ultimately, this company did not survive COVID, but I did continue to participate in innovation programs at Northwestern as a medical device innovation fellow in their Center for Device Development. My wife at the time was finishing her medical school and residency at Northwestern, and then she found an opportunity as a fellow at CU. And so I moved to Colorado, let go my entire network behind, and was searching for jobs and opportunities without any local contacts, and a 5-month-old. So I had some Photoshop skills, and I was Photoshopping into the various different areas, but really leveraged my prior network relationships to find new contacts in the ecosystem here. I reached out to the head of High Country Ventures, who had graduated from the same program 20 years earlier. We met for coffee. He introduced me to the CEO of another company, who introduced me to an investor that he had before, who put me in touch with people at CU, who then introduced me to somebody else at CU, who was the head of the tech transfer office. That ultimately led to my current position. While I was doing all this networking, I also volunteered with the Rockies Venture Club as a due diligence associate to learn more about the investment side of creating venture backable companies. So doing both the networking as well as building out my skill set and being curious was a way to continue making connections. At Innovations, I started off as the first Innovation Fellow in 2016, and then continually wrote new job descriptions for myself to build out what I was doing. And so it really, now as Managing Director for Strategy and Ops, it's been kind of a dream job. And this also creates a pipeline of analysts between the previous work I've been doing into the roles that I have today. Along the way, secured a free MBA from the Quantic School of Technology, and then launched the $100 million CU Healthcare Innovation Fund in 2019, which makes investments strategically in things that spin out of the campus or in companies that come and partner with the Andrews Medical Campus in some meaningful way. So across all these different things, I work on grant funding programs at the university, programs like Spark, the CDI Fund, Toolbox, and the Foundry. I support venture creation and work with faculty on the creation of pitch decks for forming new companies and raising capital. I work on the fund itself, doing diligence, sitting on boards, looking at the direction of companies, learning about new things. A healthy dose of curiosity is always helpful, and building out strategy on special projects. And across these different activities, it's sort of an amalgamation of various different skills that I've picked up across the board, from doing investment diligence, understanding how to pitch a project, networking, relationship management, strategic thinking, and then a general knowledge around healthcare economics and developing various different products in pharmaceuticals, med devices, diagnostics, and digital health.
Amazing. I appreciate the slides.
Sure.
That's also a fun fact that you developed the color picker. Like,
Yeah.
that's quite the claim to fame. So
It doesn't net any royalties, but it's okay. It's a free tool.
yeah, right. I think within this audience, it's like, wow, that's really cool.
Thank you for supporting all this basic research.
Of course.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so thank you all so much for a quick overview of just sort of your career journeys and how you got to where you are now. With that, we will open up to questions from the audience, from you guys, from the iCERchers. So if you have a question, you can unmute yourself, or you can raise your hand, or you can drop it in the chat, and we'll let you guys take it from here.
I'll go first.
Thanks, Dominic.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dominic. I seen you raise your hand.
No, you go first.
Okay, perfect. My question is for Safina. How much of your role involves travel? Because I seen that was like one of the main like things that folks in a medical science liaison position spend is like 80% of their time traveling. How true is that, and how has like balancing that been with like family life? Because I'm also married and I just wanted to know like what like that aspect of it.
Yeah. So I would say it's about 60%, 60 to 70% travel. It's only 80% if you really want it to be 80%. So, when I had my first role, I really hit the ground hard and was burning a lot of midnight oil because it was my first role. Opening up a territory for the first year, I wanted to see everybody in person. So I was maybe closer to the 80%, but now I'm in my third role and I am still in the first year, again, opening up a territory. So a similar space, but I'm a little older, a little wiser. So I'm able to balance it a little bit better. So a lot of people will be happy to do virtual meetings. It's always nice to meet people in person, but of course, like you have to balance that with your family and with all of your other priorities. But it's a very doable thing. And right now, I would say that doctors who we usually are calling on are maybe leaning more towards virtual because they're just very busy. And so it's a little bit easier for them. So, for instance, I had a call this morning actually, and he just called me on the phone as he was driving into work because that was kind of the only time that he had. So, I think it's a very doable amount of travel. You'll probably at most be going to like 4 major meetings a year and then maybe some regional things. And then, of course, it also depends on where you're going to live. So, if you're going to live in Colorado, then yeah, you'll have more travel than somebody who lives in San Francisco or Boston, that type of thing. Thanks for the question.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, I'll go second, I guess. Hi, I'm Dominic. Thank you for all for doing this. I wanted to ask Kelly, actually, sort of being the most recent out of the postdoc market. I'm a postdoc here at TU as well. Um, what what was it that sort of what was it about your current role that was appealing to you when you like to take it on, as opposed to you're looking at the pivot out of academia? Because as you said, it is very the idea of not doing this thing after it's sort of been your like internal identity for a long time is very scary. And I'm always interested to hear like what it is that sells someone on that switch.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So for me, yes, it's very scary to walk away. And I think the more that I talk to people about the re-entry was kind of what gave me the confidence to leave, right? I feel like we're told that all the time, if you leave, you can never come back. And I think that that's not true anymore. I know a handful of people who have left and went to industry, worked a plethora of different roles, and actually went back in our tenure track faculty. I know people who have left and that re-entered as like a staff scientist, or kind of like a right-hand man to a woman to a PI. And I also know people who have left and have no intention of re-entering, right? And I think that just talking to more people about what their what they were able to do made it feel like I wasn't maybe closing as many doors. The other two things that were really big for me personally were one, I wanted to make sure that I was entering a role that was checked enough boxes, right? So I think it's hard to know exactly what you want to do. And I still don't really know exactly what I want to do, but I knew what I wanted to do most of the time. And so I tried to make sure that I took on a role that I knew that the majority of the time I was using the skills or being challenged in a way or talking to people that would bring me joy and fulfillment. And so I kind of took the things that I loved about my postdoc and tried to mirror them, and then things that I wanted to walk away from and tried to find a job that didn't have those. So, for example, I was working a lot of nights and weekends working on rodent models. I had a 1 year old at the time and I wanted to stop doing that, right? And so I found a job that was flexible and worked from home. And as long as I get my job done, that was great. But I also wanted to make sure that I was still able. I really like scientific writing. I always really enjoyed grant writing. And so now I'm able to do that through my role. I apply to NIH SBIR grants all the time. And so I'm able to still have that skill set. I'm still able to work with academic researchers and kind of guide experimental design. So I think for me, it was really about a lot of self-reflection about what I wanted to continue to do and what I wanted to walk away from. And then if you find a role that aligns with those, it makes it less scary. And I'll also say that one of my big barriers was I felt like I needed to figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, right? Academics is the thing that you're going to be a professor for the rest of your life. This is it. This is your career. Go, right? And that was really scary for me because I knew that that's not what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to commit the rest of my working life to either. And so I tried to reframe it of what do I want to do for the next 2 to 3 years? And then it just became, okay, this is my next step in my career path. And that also gave me kind of the confidence to say, I don't need to figure it all out. I just need to figure out what's next.
Thank you. Yeah, I do appreciate that because I do feel like when you talk about career advancement as a PhD student, especially, it's like you always get those, where do you want to be in five
Right.
years, in 10 years? And you're like,
Yes, it's okay not to know, and it's okay to figure it out, and it's okay for that to change.
Great. And
I don't
that was a
think I've ever
great
met
question.
anybody that like actually followed the 5-year plan that they had ever created. So yeah.
I think especially now, the cycle times are so quick to find something else. I mean, you don't want to spend 5 years in something that you really don't enjoy. So I think even understand if you make a misstep, that's okay too, but you understand what you don't like and can find a different path and an alternative avenue.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Dominic, that was a great question. I would love to just hear also, Gali and Sofina, your perspectives on sort of that same question of when you sort of decided to step away from the traditional academic path, sort of what helped you decide to make that jump.
For me, I think I was always interested in entrepreneurial activities and understanding how to take the stuff I was working on and make it really impactful and get to patients. And so I'd always been dabbling in that space. When my co-founder at Syntact graduated, he said, "Hey, do you want to join this company with me?" It sounded like a fun opportunity, and so I just led with curiosity to jump in and learn a whole new thing. I'd never been a chief operations officer of a small medical device company before. We were two people, and so I learned a whole bunch of stuff along the way. And then my faculty advisors, both the computational one and the experimental one, were entrepreneurial themselves. The one in the animal lab just got something approved through the FDA. And so they were always encouraging exploration and opportunities beyond sort of the academic realm. And I picked them for that particular purpose. So I had in mind going into the PhD that I wanted to follow a non-traditional translational route than the postdoc path.
And then, so I kind of had an idea when I graduated with my PhD that this didn't seem like I wanted to stay in the lab, but I did the postdoc to kind of solidify that and give myself the time to really think about it and the time to do exploration because I kind of had my nose down during my PhD. I didn't really do any of the career development I should have. I didn't do the networking I should have, but um, I was able to do that during the postdoc while also giving myself the time to come to the realization that like yes, I gave this one more shot in a different environment and I still don't feel like this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so like Kelly mentioned, I was thinking about, well, what is it that I do love to do? Because I do love science. I definitely want to stay in science in some aspect. So what are my strengths and what do I want to be using in my everyday life? And so I try to find jobs that were going to be playing on those strengths when I took my first position. And then that's kind of just grown over the years. Definitely didn't follow any 5-year plan that I had ever told anyone I had. It was sort of just opportunities would arise, and you have to take the leap sometimes and just yeah like Golly said, lead with curiosity.
That's great. Thank you all for sharing those perspectives. Um, does anyone else? I have more questions I can ask, but I will give our iSearchers a chance. Oh yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy, by the way. I do have a question, and which is also a concern I usually have. It's likely a myth because many of my friends and my parents are keep telling me that if I want to enter the industry, there is always a age required, like a age limit. Usually, the many of the industry position only want fresh graduate students or people with, for example, been like less than 30-year old. Is that actually true based on your experiences and your observation in the industry? Or do you think people, for example, after postdoc and after so many years in their middle 30-year old can still enter the industry in different other position without much barrier?
I guess I can answer it. I don't, I didn't find that to be true. Um, I also was a little worried about that when I was applying for roles because a lot of them say, PhD within X number of years. And I did get some questions of, okay, why are you leaving your postdoc? I see you're in the middle of this grant because was awarded my F-32 and was leaving it. Um, but I never felt like I always felt like if I just explained myself and explained my intentions, I don't think I ran into barriers. Um, I also don't think that there's necessarily an age. People get PhDs at all different ages. I think especially now. And I think if there's this is easier said than done. And so I don't want to say all of, these things that sound fruity are not true, but I think that if someone is going to use your experience against you, that's likely not a role that you want to be in anyway. I think that you want to end up in a role that someone will see your experience from all of the places that you've been and all of the training that you've had and try to put you in a position or a role that will bring out the best of that. And then that's a place that you can grow from. And perhaps it's like I have a friend that actually got hired. She applied to one that wanted someone closer to their PhD, but she had completed her postdoc and they moved her to a different job opening within the company. So that can happen too, is maybe it's just a role mismatch of who you are and what skills you have and then where you're applying. But I wouldn't let that be a barrier. Or, if you feel like you want more time in your postdoc to gain more skills, definitely stay there. Don't let that kind of instill some fear, but that's my take.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kelly. Particularly, I mean, if there's an artificial age sort of line in a group, it's probably maybe not a place you might want to go if it's a particular concern. From the venture side, there's usually a greater experience or investability in individuals that have gone through the process before and has developed some scars. So it is very challenging early on to raise investment capital and secure in that way. The best advice I give to folks who are interested in that avenue is to try to shadow a project and sort of ride shotgun to a successful spin out and then go out and launch your own, just so you get exposure to those kinds of processes and then you can attach that to your CV.
And then from the MSL perspective, actually, it's very hard to get an MSL position straight out of graduate school because usually you don't have that like customer type facing experience. You've been in the lab, maybe you've trained some people, but they want to see that type of experience within other things that you've done. So in this role, it's actually the reverse. I don't see very many people going straight from graduate school into this role. They usually have to do something like a field application scientist or something that gives you that real life customer facing experience that you can really play on when you're applying to these roles. But I can also see in maybe some other roles. So like as a field application scientist, when I was at 10x Genomics, maybe being closer to the time that you were at the bench, not necessarily like when you graduated, even a postdoc would be great. That gives you more relevant experience for that job. So it could be more dependent on the role and not necessarily the age, for the reason that they would want somebody that had recently had these experiences at the bench because that's something that you're going to be pulling on every day, whereas that's not something you pull on every day as an MSL.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful for me to hear.
All right. What other questions from our iSearchers here?
I have another one if anyone else has one.
Yeah, great.
Um, both Kelly and Gali, you both mentioned being parents. I myself have a 14-month-old daughter. Um, and so I think it is certainly something that is in the forefront of my mind with each job, thinking about the future positions, whether it be as a PI, a staff scientist, or elsewhere in the world, how that balance works. So I guess I'm kind of curious. You talked a little bit about your day to day, but I am kind of curious how you find your job balance works with being a parent, and how that works or doesn't work for you, or over time how they haven't worked for you. I think Kelly, you did mention that switching over to a home role was very helpful for that purpose. Golly, I from what I've heard of various entrepreneur positions, I know Dr. Malik Cahook from the ophthalmology department does this nonstop, and it sounds like it's his whole world. So I am very curious how that balances for you on your end.
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, if I didn't have kids, I'd probably be an entrepreneur and jumping into spin-out companies myself because of the time commitment required. But being very self-aware now with two kids, 11 and 8, my risk profile has gone down substantially, and so I need to find something that's it's more stable. Having gone through a company that went belly up, I'm still an entrepreneurial mindset, but I'm more of an intrapreneur. So sitting in the tech transfer office, I can work with faculty members. I can jump in at interesting projects and figure out what would be the next step to develop a technology across multiple different projects. And so I have less of a personal economic stake or benefit for the success there. But what I'm trading there is the flexibility I have to be able to close the computer probably like 7 p.m. at night, and go home and spend time with the family. This afternoon I leave at 4 o'clock, usually to go take the kids to their baseball game. And so it's a lot more flexible because I'm not on the hook for keeping the company afloat if I were a CEO. The other key factor is my wife is a clinician over at Children's Hospital, and so her schedule is much more inflexible in terms of having clinical rotations and seeing patients. And so I'm usually the flexible one that does all the pickups and drop-offs and the after school programs, but usually on a call while I'm doing that.
Thanks for your question. I feel like at least when I was in this program, I felt like it was something that was hard to talk about. And so I appreciate it bringing brought up because for me, it was really important. I always said when I was kind of applying to jobs with, I don't know, 10 to year old daughter, I said I didn't have a daughter to not spend any time with her because I just felt like I never saw her. I was in the lab all the time. I remember I was crunching data 4 days postpartum, right? It's all these things that felt so normal in academia. And now that I'm out of it, I was like, what was I doing, right? I now have two daughters and I didn't do any work on my second maternity leave. So that was a good change. But flexibility was a huge priority for me when I was looking for a role. And so I found that I needed to just ask really clear questions and I kind of had to be vulnerable and say, family, I have young kids, family life is really important to me. Um, I think that, my career is very important to me. And I think that there's a place that I can succeed in both of these places and I'm not able to now. And I felt like just putting it at the forefront allowed me to find a culture match in a job that feels really supportive. And so we're all remote in my company and we're all in different time zones. And so kind of the only time that I'm really ever locked up for meetings is from 10 to 3. And then around it, everyone kind of sets their own schedule. And so, we have one of my coworkers is very into skiing. And so for 2 months out of the year, he lives in Vermont and he skis the weekdays and works the weekends so he can be on the slope when they're not busy, right? And so these jobs exist and they're out there. They take a little bit of time to find. And, I feel fortunate that I was able to find one that really works with my home life. But I have never once felt like, when I was in my postdoc, I felt like I was failing at my postdoc and failing at being a mom, in full transparency. And now I feel like I can, you know, some days not so much, but I feel like both roles I feel good about. And so it's nice to be able to feel like I can be the mom that I want to be, and I can also continue to progress my career, and that they're no longer kind of at the expense of the other one. So I think it's just finding a role, and I know that, and I have friends that are faculty that also do all the picks up and drop offs, and so I think that it just is more the people that you're around and the culture of where you are. And I think these things can exist in roles. And I also think that they can not exist in roles with the exact same title. So I think it's not necessarily about what the position is or what the job title is, but what the culture of the company or where you're going is.
Thank you.
I don't have any children, but I all of my all of my colleagues, most of my colleagues have children. One of them actually has five, and I don't know how he's doing it, but I have two dogs, so I have a little bit of managing of schedules between my husband and I. But this is at the MSL role, while I can have a lot of travel, um, like I mentioned, if you need to switch something to virtual, people are happy to do that. And there's a lot of flexibility, kind of like what Kelly said. You are the owner of your own schedule. And so if you can't be traveling on these dates because, there's something that you don't want to miss, or you need to be home for your children, then like you just block those dates off. And you say like, I have to be home here. And so I'm going to travel on these dates instead. So I think that there's lots of flexibility within this role as well. And kind of like Kelly said, it will depend on your company, but I haven't been at a company that wouldn't understand that yet. I'm sure they exist, but I think for the vast majority, people are understanding of that, as well as the people that you're calling on, so the doctors and the nurses and the PAs.
Yeah,
I can ask a
good question.
question.
Oh, yes,
Um,
please.
my name's my name's Ariel. I'm a postdoc. And I was just wondering when hiring into like your positions, I know it doesn't sound like you guys do hiring, but like when they do with the hiring, are there any skills that you worry about someone from academia not having that they should maybe highlight that they do have? You're
Yeah.
muted.
Sorry, I do a lot of hiring in the innovations office. And one of the skills that we do look for is in our work, the ability to communicate with almost anybody and sort of be able to translate the science, understand sort of the marketing components. There's a lot of communication back and forth between investors and different kinds of groups. So the ability to translate and sort of go into spaces where you may not be an expert, but if you dig a little bit more, how would you become an expert in that space? I think those are very translatable skills that we've picked up as PhDs and postdocs in terms of digging into a topic, understanding it, and then being able to communicate it out. But the communication out has to be to a variety of different kinds of audiences that may be the lay community.
I had another question. So, I was just curious in terms of like entry level, like out of postdoc, out of PhD, what the salary range looks like versus like later into the careers that each of you guys have.
So I can speak to the salary range of of the MSL, like from entry level MSL up to the like a senior or a principal MSL. So usually your first role, you'll be maybe 150 to 180 on the nicer end. Um, and then as you progress, I think the highest I've ever seen is like 250. But in terms of like the roles that I had before moving into the MSL role, which really allowed me to get that role, it was lower. So like 90 to like 110 for those like cells and field application scientist roles. And that's going to also depend on like where you live. So San Francisco, people are going to be hopefully paid a little bit more in some of those roles compared to people in the Midwest. But for MSLs, it doesn't actually change depending on where you live.
I can speak to this a little bit. My company did this with me, and I know that it's pretty typical, or it can be typical to some people, clinical trial managers that work at CROs. Sometimes they have kind of this trial period or a 1 year period where they'll call you an assistant clinical trial manager, or my title didn't change, but sometimes they have what seems like a trial of like 1 year right out of your postdoc where your salary is probably around 100. And this is, across different job postings that I've seen. And then after that, I negotiated for a 6-month salary renegotiation, and sometimes it's a year. But basically, that kind of gets to the question of, do you have the skills that they want, right? You're coming out of your PhD, your postdoc, they're hiring you for a specific role. They think that you have them, but they want to hire you kind of at this lesser role and then, quickly promote. So I think in clinical research, this is not uncommon for people to spend a year at a kind of assistant level role and then see a significant salary bump kind of after that. I think there's can be a lot of turnover in clinical research and clinical trial managers specifically, which I am not, but I have several colleagues that are in those positions, and that's a pretty typical hiring structure and salary structure within those positions.
And within tech transfer, there's a couple of different kinds of roles. But for licensing managers, they'll range depending on your level of seniority. Coming in, it'll be anywhere 80, 90K to start, but it can go up to 150, 180 to the higher levels. In spin-out companies and startups, as a CEO, if you're driving your own entity, you kind of set your own salary, but you also have to fundraise and get capital for it. So it can't be crazy out of the range of possibilities. So there's a variety of different kinds of roles in the startup realm. Also, whether it's in smaller companies, more senior positions at the C-suite or primarily staff scientists. But there's a lot more flexibility in terms of where you're at and how you can build out the value and demonstrate that in smaller entities than larger corporate groups where you are another scientist across a larger sort of staff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate all of your transparency on that, because both this question and the previous question, or the one before about being a parent, just these are important things that oftentimes is hard to talk about. So I appreciate all of your candor on that. So are there any other iCERch questions?
I have two questions for Kelly mainly. So I really do like bench work, but I've always wanted to go into more kind of a clinical translational space. So my two questions are, what exactly are you doing as a clinical trial manager, and how would you recommend kind of gaining the experience or the like skill set that's needed? Because I feel like when I look at the requirements on a job listing, it's not anything I have any experience with.
Sure. Um, so yeah, like I said, in a small company, I wear several different hats. So my clinical trial or my clinical research manager side is essentially, so I work at a nutrition technology company. We create tools that academic or private research institutions, much like Anschutz, people at Anschutz use our tool, will contact us because they want a new technology made or they want to test their research question using our technology. So I'm sort of the in-between of the people who are actually kind of writing the IRBs and doing the research and us in creation of the tool. That being said, because of the skill sets that I have, I am a lot more involved than the person that held my role previously who did not have their PhD. So having kind of the skills that you bring to the table, I'm able to really help develop the research protocol. I ask a lot of questions. Are you sure you don't want to do this? What about your study population? I'm working with the researcher from the point that I'm writing the grant with them all the way through carrying out the actual clinical trial, and even in some cases, helping them with data analysis. And so that's kind of how I interface with it. Now, I did do a lot of bench work, but I had the benefit that my master's was all clinical research, and then my postdoc did have a clinical arm. So even though my PhD was all preclinical models, I had that experience. And so when I was applying to those jobs, I really tried to highlight those skills and kind of downplay my bench work. My advice to you there is really working with the job description and seeing kind of how your skills can translate to a clinical right? So they'll talk about a lot of regulatory, right? IRB regulatory. You probably, maybe you don't have any experience about that, but you've maybe done iCook protocols if you work with rodents, right? And so any way that you can apply the skills that you have and how they would apply. And then if you're a person that learns really quickly or has a lot of interest in it, you can highlight those things because even if you don't have the skills, but you can convince someone that you can learn them quickly will also help you kind of land those roles. And you can showcase that through an interview by, maybe you haven't worked with, good clinical practice guidelines, but if you know them and you can talk to them, that will be impressive in of itself. And then maybe you can, I don't know what your lab situation is, but if there's any way to get your hands into clinical work while you're still at a university that's surrounded by it, could be a good way to go about doing that too. Was there another part of your question that I didn't answer?
No, that
Okay.
was it. Thank you.
A good question to Galia specifically. For people who are interested in this entrepreneurial path per se, but have no prior experience, and doesn't even know more about it, how do you find the potential network, and how do you approach them to know more about it and get to know the translation and all of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're actively developing some educational content for folks who are interested in learning some of the key languages of translating technologies to patient impact, particularly in the biomedical sciences space. But I think ultimately networking, going to conferences and talking to the folks that might be there that are on the entrepreneurial side, your startup companies, technologies that are adjacent to your area of research, is a way to sort of get embedded. Or if you want to launch your own venture, there's a variety of different kinds of groups that you can get associated with, like angel capital groups for the investor networks, and talking to those that are kind of in that space. Venture capital entrepreneurial activities are almost entirely network based. And so if there's a particular project or company or group you're interested in connecting with, I'd be happy to sort of make connections for you. We had researchers here on campus that wanted to connect to the CEO of another company. We had commonalities between the board members at that company that made an introduction that then brought us down to the CEO level, which led to the introduction. And so it's all warm handoffs, all network-based kind of conversations to kind of find the opportunities you're looking for.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Amazing. Okay, well, I think we're wrapping up. So I think I'm going to finish us off with like one final sort of ending question to all three of you. So my question would be, what is the best advice that you got during your training in terms of like your career development and sort of helping you get into the career you are in now? Or what is the advice you wish you had gotten when you were a trainee?
I can go first. So the advice I wish I had gotten was to really take advantage of this time that you're a trainee, like Kelly said, because there is no other time that people are going to be willing to help you this much. People are so much more invested in you and your success right now. So if there's something that you need experience in, like getting that clinical box checked by, maybe you're helping to consent people on an IRB, or, just working in somebody else's lab to get experience that's going to help you move into that next role that you want. This is the time to do it while you're still a trainee, because people are not as willing to help you once you leave. So I think yeah, like you're doing all the right steps right now. You're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do. And so when you kind of have a clearer path, you can start collecting those experiences and those skills, or just experiences to check boxes that will help you get into that first role.
I think for me, having tried, or when I came into Colorado, applying for, I think it was 50, 60 different positions and hearing back from maybe two and hearing that I was overqualified, I think I underappreciated the value of the network, and just having connections. Both everybody I met with, earlier in my career, undergrad, graduate school. I still call on some of those old contacts for different kinds of programs and projects. And now moving forward, that's absolutely critical because it's a unique element that you bring to the table in terms of uh, uh, who you can sort of help leverage to advance a particular project or program, or even the MSL world. I imagine is connecting different kinds of groups and clinicians that you're talking to. So the value of network is absolutely critical, and you're already building that today in your PhD and postdoc programs.
I think what I would say is don't be afraid to tell people that you're exploring your career. I feel like I was afraid to tell my PI or the people in my lab that I was looking to leave because you feel like all these people invest in you and they do. And so I felt kind of some responsibility to stay for them. And, at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you. But looking back now, I realized that I was only hindering my ability to really network. And I felt like I didn't have a network because I felt like everyone that I knew was in academia. But it's like the minute that I got involved in this iSearch program and they force you to talk about the fact that you're searching around and I started telling my colleagues, my fellow postdocs, I'm looking into other roles. I'm interested in other roles. That's actually how I landed this position. It was through a fellow postdoc who knew someone at the company that I met now that just mentioned that she had a friend that was looking for a role. So this role wasn't even posted when I started hiring for it. So I think it's like the more I would just give myself the advice of like, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to tell people that this isn't what you want to do or that you're trying to figure it out. And I think you'll be surprised that people are willing to help rather than I thought there certainly will be probably some people that are disappointed that you leave, but they'll forget about it and you have to live with it for the rest of your life. So I think the more that you talk about it, the better you'll be.
All great advice. All right. Well, yeah, thank you all so much for your time today. We're approaching one. I don't want to go over time, so I think we are gonna wrap things up here. So once again, thank you all so much. For our iSearch participants, I highly encourage you to reach out to our panelists, maybe on LinkedIn, since you all have nice updated LinkedIn profiles now. Especially if you feel like there were some questions that you just didn't get a chance to ask, because I know we have limited time here together today. That'd be a great way to just follow up with those panelists today. So thank you all again so much. And yeah, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate the questions.
Thank you.
Everyone, this was
Thank
great.
you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Yes.